expected from September. So it's not just Israel looking at third doses.
Yes, exactly. We've got. We're going to roll out, we think, from September, this third dose. And when the Press and Journal, who have been quite excellent in not challenging the official narrative in any way, shape, or form, this is one of the oldest newspapers in the world, and they have been craving in their obedience to the government line. But they went and they talked to the expert in charge, Professor Lim. And he said, well, we're not really sure. We don't have the data, and our advice may change substantially. So we're going to roll this out, but we're not able to even pretend we have the safety and efficacy data to justify it.
Yes. Okay. So let's come back to other topics, and this is RT, and the headline is 10 years on from UK race riots that left 5 dead. Are we facing new outbreaks of civil unrest, this time over COVID clampdowns? So what's going on here, David? Is this pushing a UK government narrative that the anti-lockdown rallies are gateway drug to the more extreme position?
Oh, this is a piece of work. Do you remember when Channel 4 News used to be actually worth watching, and it was the area where you get more truth than anything else on television, and then it just stopped and it decayed. Well, RT was this as well. RT for a long time put stuff out there that no one else would broadcast, and it's been in decline for some years, but this, I think, is the low point. So the photograph here tries to suggest that Kate Shemarami in her pink scrubs nurse's outfit and this masked rioter burning a car are somehow, in a funny kind of way, the same thing. And they go on and they talk about the BlackBerry messaging which generated the riots, an explosion of hedonism and nihilism, according to David Lammy. And they record some of the tweets and some of the BlackBerry messages that were encouraged people to join in the riots. And then they say, well, it's really very similar now for the anti-lockdown protests, because they're organised on Telegram, and that's really just a modern equivalent, and it's really the same thing. So this is a dreadful, dreadful smear on roughly 1 million beautiful people who marched through London not that long ago, peacefully, smiling, and this is suggesting that they are a riotous mob simply waiting on a spark. They carry on talking about a white riot, bringing in Tommy Robinson and Katie Hopkins as race baiters. I think they would both disagree with that characterization, and taking again very much out of context something that Kate Shemarami said at that the last meeting at Trafalgar Square. This is fighting talk. This is riot talk. All this mob needs is a spark, a flame. So you see all these people who are out there to peacefully protest against the COVID lockdown are now being characterized by RT as a mob. They have the means of communication, they have the loudmouths and figureheads, they have the grievances, and they certainly have the numbers. All they need is an excuse. So all these peaceful people are just looking for an excuse to riot. This is unbelievable. It's egregious. It's dreadful.
And it is pushing the same narrative that the British government is pushing, that what we're facing in this country is an increase in right-wing extremism, that lockdown and anti-lockdown protests are the way into that. And that, but if we actually look at what's been happening on the ground at recent demonstrations, of course, any time there has been any issue between the police and protesters, quite often, and if not in every case, somebody from the organizers or from somebody from the crowd is getting in the way to settle things down again. So it seems like this crowd self-polices in a very intelligent way. Well, frankly, on the marches, there has been no hint of this type of activity at all. And as we said on the march on the 26th of June, the only event which took place that could possibly have generated a headline of in the sense of police intervention, was something that happened outside Downing Street. It was over in 30 seconds. It looked entirely staged. I believe it was entirely staged. And the people that were throwing the bottles were wearing masks, which nobody else was. So it was all very strange. I'm not clear that there's any evidence whatsoever of any extremist thought in
the
that
wider body of the
absolutely
people. Yeah.
Absolutely. David, let's come on to Scotland then. And rats.
Yes, it's just a little data point on the management of the city of Glasgow and indeed the nation of Scotland by the SNP administration. We're now having bin man hospitalised after rat attack in Glasgow. It's not the first time either. The rats are coming up. More on this maybe in extra time. But I would just say to all the people coming for the climate change conference in Glasgow, you don't go to the East End of Glasgow unless you are prepared to fight off the rats.
But surely the rats are as a result of anthropogenic climate change, are they not?
I suspect it's more to do with reduction in bin collection services, Mike. I think it might be more prosaic than climate change.
It's food related.
Yes. Okay. Well, now, Nicola Sturgeon, we've just had her on, and I'm going to regret to say to our audience that we have to have her on once again. But just introduce this.
Oh no, this one's comedy gold. You're going to love this one. Now the background is Nicola Sturgeon said that her plan, and she was committed to doing this, was to vaccinate 100% of a particular age group in Scotland. Now when this didn't happen, and people started to say, well, you said you were going to vaccinate all of these, Nicola's response was obviously it was the people who were listening to her who were in the wrong. And you have to roll the tape. I can't find words to describe this. Just enjoy.
When I communicate, and I apologise if this is an error, okay? I kind of communicate at a level where I assume a certain level of intelligence on the part of people listening to me, because I think that's justified. And I assume a certain ability to attach context and common sense to what I am saying. The last thing I would say is I hope I can sometimes stand at this podium and sound irritated, and I'm sure I've just done that, and if that's the case, I apologise. This is not just any old political issue. This is a global pandemic. It really matters, and all of us, scrutiny on the government matters, and even if I sound irritated sometimes about that, I know how important that is, and I don't shy away from that. But surely we should all try to have grown up, sophisticated, nuanced discussions. And the most important thing right now is not getting into some kind of dancing on the head of a pin debate about what I meant when I used a particular word, but how do we go from the sensible position we had, which we've met in terms of the target, to all of us trying to persuade those who haven't been vaccinated to get vaccinated? That's what I'm focused on.
Oh, I hope you enjoyed that, because I certainly did. Nicola is losing it. That's a kind of a jump the shark moment. That was just glorious. So Nicola says the wrong thing. And it's your fault, Brian. It's your fault, Mike. It's my fault because we're not intelligent enough to follow the nuances and the subtleties of the Sturgeon speech. And understand the background because we're just too childlike and ignorant, I'm afraid. That's what the dear leader says.
And isn't it interesting that really ties in with where Fiona Fox from The Guardian was going, because if you dare criticise, you're not intelligent enough to understand the scientific advice. Okay, there's, one was upmarket theatre from The Guardian, the other was a little bit more of a common concert hall. But the same message.
Okay, now last week on Monday, David covered the drug-related deaths in Scotland in 2020. This was published on the 30th of July, 2021. And it was saying that there were, effectively Scotland had the highest rate of drug-related deaths in the whole of Europe. Well, the British or the English and Welsh figures were out from the Office for National Statistics on the 3rd of August 2021. And although it's not as bad as Scotland, it's not looking terribly good here either. So the Scottish figures, 1,339 deaths in 2020. That's a 5% increase in 2019. And as a proportion of the population, that's pretty huge. And England and Wales, 4,561 deaths in 2020, which is the highest since records began in 1993. So Scotland, as we just said, has the highest rate of drug-related deaths in Europe. And if we combine the deaths from England and Wales, we find that that makes up around a third of all drug-related deaths in Europe. So the British Isles has, or at least the British mainland has 1/3 of all the drug-related deaths in the whole of Europe. This is quite spectacular. Well, last week, Dame Carol Black published her government-sponsored review of drugs, and this is what she said. This is the independent review of drugs. She said the government faces an unavoidable choice: invest in tackling the problem or keep paying for the consequences. The problem can only be solved through, well, I've bracketed it fusion here, but what did she actually say? The problem can only be solved through coordinated action by multiple departments, including the Home Office, Department of Health and Social Care, Department for Work and Pensions, Ministry of Housing, communities and local government, and also the Ministry of Justice. So again, we've got another policy area where the answer to it is to merge all the government departments into one thing. And she said greater coordination and accountability at national level, but must also flow through to the local level. So again, we've got another policy area where effectively what you do is you devolve, because that's what you do. Devolution is the sort of raison d'etre of everything at the moment. So David, that's what she has to say. We're not going to solve the underlying problems of the drug misuse in the country. You know, for example, we might want to deal with the economy or something and give people something to do with their time. No, or we're not going to do that. We're going to continue to merge government agencies, devolve government policy down to the lowest level, and make sure that we treat symptoms and not the disease.
Well, this is it, and this policy has seen the rate in Scotland soar to approximately threefold the very worrying rate in England and Wales. Without any really intelligent conversation from any government source about what the underlying causes actually are.
Indeed. Now, let's move on to this. PayPal is now partnering with the Anti-Defamation League to fight extremism and protect marginalized communities. And I find this interesting. David, you can give us the details in a second, but I find this particularly interesting because, of course, probably the one area which is going to be next in terms of deplatforming and censorship and making sure people can't pursue any non-government narrative is going to be the payment processors.
Exactly so, and the payment processors know they're under threat, and therefore they have purchased an indulgence. Not from the Pope this time, but from the Anti-Defamation League, a very similar organisation in many ways. And they are claiming to fight hate for good, whatever that means exactly. And PayPal have launched into partnership with the ADL to fight extremism through the financial industry. And this means that they're going to be collaborating and researching and looking at sharing a lot of information. So if you get paid through PayPal, presumably your information is shared with the Anti-Defamation League and, well, who knows who else. The intelligence gathered through this research initiative will be shared broadly across the financial industry and with policymakers and law enforcement, so that's reassuring. Quote, by identifying partners across sectors with common goals and complementary resources, we can make even greater impact than any of us could do alone, says the Chief Risk Officer for PayPal. We are excited to partner with the ADL, other non-profits and law enforcement in their fight against hate in all its forms. Now, I thought that was a very interesting comment. They're fighting against hate in all its forms, including the forms of hate which are righteous, I would suggest. There are things that we absolutely should hate. Lying, abuse of children, and the manipulation of other human beings being three that leap to mind, but apparently all hate